The state likes nothing more than to declare war on drugs or terrorism or poverty or inequality. The state loves equality as an organizing principle because it can never be achieved. In the course of trying, the state acquires ever more power over more practices and institutions. Anyone who questions the premise of equality is hectored out of polite society. Quite a racket this is, and certainly no place for libertarians to be. If it's material equality we want, it would vanish the moment after we achieved it. As soon as people resume their normal spending patterns and the goods and services offered by some people were more highly valued than those offered by others. Welcome to Keith Knight, Don't Tread on Anyone. I know that was a long one, but that is in Lou Rockwell's latest book, and I just thought it was terrific. Today we have Shane Hazel of Radical with Shane Hazel. Mr. Hazel, where is the best place to find your collection of work?
Hey, Keith, thanks for having me, man. RadicalPod.com is really a site I'm working on in transition right now for a whole bunch of big things coming, but RadicalPod.com, all my links are there, and you can really kind of keep up with me mostly on Twitter and Facebook.
Links will be in the description below. Mr. Hazel, today I just want to go over this bold messaging, which they attempted to silence in New Hampshire. Fortunately, they failed. I want to really show people how it's done through this sort of devil's advocate that I often like to play. So, Mr. Hazel, what is libertarianism? I think it's just Republicans who like to smoke pot. What is it really?
Man, I guess it depends on who you ask in terms of being a liberty fighter. Liberty is a whole bunch of different things, and that's the beautiful thing about it is as long as you're not hurting people and taking their stuff, you know, you can be part of the libertarian circles. I was obviously subscribed to the non-aggression principle, which will bore the hell out of anybody listening. But the idea that we don't hurt people and don't take their stuff and that good ideas don't require force is really the baseline for where I operate out of. It's simple enough for a cran eater like myself to understand. So what we're talking about is really a mostly stateless society where we don't subscribe to rulers. We don't subscribe to social contracts. We don't subscribe to any of these things. We believe in consent. We believe in association. We believe in your rights that come naturally, not the ones that the Fabian socialists will talk about in terms of positive rights. So we think those are slavery. So we think, you know, everything that the state ever has, it is stolen, and everything it says is a lie. So, you know, in my vernacular, I've kind of come to understand them mostly like the anti-federalists did, where they call them the aristocratic combination of very wealthy, I guess, people out there. I call them the murder cult because it combines the government, the banks, corporatism. It combines the schooling apparatus and the propaganda apparatus as well, not to mention everything else that it touches. So libertarianism stands against all of those things.
You mentioned positive rights. So if I believe that people should have a right to health care, you need it to live, therefore everyone should have it unless you want people to die. Why don't I have a right to health care?
Yeah, I guess if you think you can hold a gun to somebody else's head and make them provide for you, I guess that's, you know, that's a positive right. That's why we think it's enslavement. Anytime you're using force to you know, justify your ends, it's not something that we agree with here as libertarians whatsoever. So yeah, you can't take things through force and coercion. That's an automatic out for libertarians, right?
Is it possible to solve poverty with the absence of a state making sure the masses are represented?
I don't know that I even agree with the premise of the question, right? It is like, I don't think you can solve poverty because it's a subjective term to begin with. There's always going to be people who have less physical wealth in this world than other people. So at the end of the day, it's really just a subjective term. In terms of lifting people out of the muck and the squalor, I think that history has proven time and time again that where free people can recognize their passion, they can create genius, and geniuses lift the human condition. And so liberty is the best friend to the impoverished.
Love it. In a society without a state, do you fear that some people would sort of take advantage of there not being an FDA or an EPA, and they might harm others through externalities? Does the potential for externalities justify a state and a regulatory industry?
No, I think every time we point to the FDA or any other three-letter bureaucracy and agency, what we're doing is pointing out the failures of the state. And so, for a state to be able to systematically do these things like poison us and tell us what's good and what's not good for us, and to have ridiculous food pyramids from the '80s that no longer make any sense, I think the injustice that can be done in a systematic level towards peaceful people with their own money, life, liberty, and property is one of the greatest threats to our not only our well-being but to our rights and being free men and women.
Yeah, it drives me up the wall when I hear them talk about how needing like one license to vote is just basically slavery. I mean, if you have to this is going to stop millions of poor people from achieving their dreams because they don't know how to get a driver's license. But what do you think 10,000 fucking regulations does, and a 1,000 licenses that you need because the Department of Agriculture says the door has to open out instead of open in, so they're shutting you down for 3 fucking weeks. There is such a blatant double standard. Of course, regulation hurts the poor and gives us less choices as consumers and less choices as employees, and there's less competition and higher prices. This is absolute nonsense.
It opens the door as soon as you think that a government can regulate industry. It gives the industry this predisposition to want to lobby the government so that it does knock out those entry rungs, so it does knock out competition. And so, what they say is, I guess the first thing that's what is it? The first thing that is bought and sold are the politicians when industry is regulated. Like that's. I should say, I've absolutely wrecked that. In the saying is, oh man, and I hate when I do that. She's a Pete. The first thing that is bought and sold when government, I guess, regulates what's bought and sold is politicians. I still ruined it, but kind of get the gist.
Yeah,
I'm gonna have to work on that one.
Well, of course, when they go to regulate an industry that, like, my phone has never rang, and it's Kirsten Cinema. Hey, Keith, how do we regulate the medical industry? They go to the CEOs and the people who know this stuff the most. J.P. Morgan, most famously, played a vitally important role in the Federal Reserve Act, giving the state a monopoly on the currency. That's the way it's always played. Speaking of monopolies, do we need a government to protect us from monopolies that would otherwise arise in a free market?
No, free market monopolies exist where there is nobody else providing the best service or good at the lowest price. And as soon as somebody provides a good of substantial or equal value to a market, the monopoly is gone. It's the government monopolies on force that we have to worry about, because if you're not allowed to compete with the people that have a monopoly on force, then you've got a real problem out there, especially when they start taking over industry like energy or food or things like that. So yeah, no, there's no real, the only protection in a free market on monopolies is the supplier of the good or service to give us the best good or service at the lowest price.
Government is a monopoly on violence. Please explain that idea like I'm 5 years old. Let's say 10. The average person I speak to is roughly mentally 10 with regard to politics. So let's leave it there.
What's the natural governing law of nature, right? Is like, hey man, you're going to invite harm upon yourself if you harm other people. So let's talk about what real crime is first. It is murder, rape, assault, kidnapping, coercion, trespassing, theft, vandalism, property damage, and things of heinous natures, right? And so you don't have the right to take anybody's life, liberty, or property, and then neither does the state. And when we talk about this, is in this fundamental being of why they have a monopoly on force, is now as soon as the legislature says something's legal and the executive says, yeah, we'll enforce that, and judicial system says, yeah, we'll agree with that rule. Now, all of a sudden, you have this illegitimate system that will say, hey, everything that we're doing is legal. We'll investigate ourselves and we'll find out what we did was all right. And the monopoly on force goes round and round in the sixth circle until you get to 2021 in America. And you've got the most impressive mass incarceration empire on the planet.
And is the problem that we don't have the right people elected? Maybe the state is this inevitable institution, so we just should accept it and make sure we get kind, virtuous people like Kamala Harris as president.
I can cuss on your show, right? So the answer is an absolutely fuck no, right? Like,
when Kamala Harris is the topic, cussing is mandatory. So yes, please.
Yeah. I was gonna say, like, yeah, no, I mean, the simple premise, right, is like, hey, man, like, I want your shit. It's too damn bad if it's just me and you two dudes, right? Like, no, unless you're coming over here with more firepower, you're not going to take this kind of stuff. And good luck, because I'm going to get one or two of you bastards. But the state, on the other hand, man, they everything that they have is taken by force and coercion. So they can't ever be a legitimate, a legitimate body unless you're opting in and have the ability to opt out. The state is, this reckless monster murder cult that has all the trappings of a religion built into it, and the mass genocide to back it up.
Let's consider the state as a religion. Certainly, when you watch a number of these political rallies, you see people finding their purpose and meaning in these figures, to the point where it's like, oh my gosh, they just fell for it 4 years ago. They're falling for it again. It's like Charlie Brown and the football being taken away at the beginning of every episode, and he keeps falling. How do you have any ideas on how to maybe either give people something else to believe in, or sort of try to give them something that they can really appreciate and find meaning in? This way, even if they don't understand our intellectual arguments, they won't have that empty space where they seek out politicians.
Yeah, I mean, volunteerism is one of those things, right? It's hard for a lot of people to conceptualize, but you gotta, I mean, I think most people would right now and go, hey, so if we can sit here and say this isn't working, why are we going to continue to do it, right? Like, that's the definition of insanity. I think most people would agree with that. Left, right, center. Most people think that the entire system is broken. I have an idea, and I'm going to try it out for governor. If I get to be the governor of Georgia in 2022, I'm not going to take a cent of taxpayer money. I'm going to do this, completely self-funding and provide a good and service to the people. And then I think what, a quote unquote volunteerist executive type of government, does is they go out and they find problems within their state and they tell people, hey man, we got some problems in this area. Here's a GoFundMe, or here's a crowd starter. Here's something that can help these people, and let people use their resources where they think they can, and dedicate them locally or to causes that they are behind, instead of what we see today, where if you don't agree with abortion, you're still paying for it. If you don't agree with war, you're still paying for it. If you don't agree with the drug war, you're still paying for it. Like, these are the kind of things, this assault on your conscience in terms of their ability to come in and take all these things. Well, we can do something different. We can do something voluntary. We can do something peaceful, which brings communities together instead of dividing communities. Like, like when it comes down to it, like, if you don't care about these people who are detoxing from meth or whatever, then fine, don't pay for it. But maybe some of us do find some some real value in peace, places and people that will provide that service out there, where there's not quote unquote a market for something like that.
Is that what gives these politicians so much power? They almost claim supernatural things, like, we're going to guarantee free healthcare. Like, so the doctors aren't going to get paid? The construction workers who build the buildings aren't going to get paid? Oh, you mean the state's going to coercively fund and monopolize it? Is it getting people to see through the nonsense and propaganda? Do you think that is just as important as teaching them the principles?
Yeah, I think you got to nail principles first, and and to make these, I don't know, these inroads. I think what I've found very helpful is my own story, right? Is just getting into my lessons learned, the hard pills that I had to swallow, the fact that I was absolutely duped by the state, and I didn't really. I mean, you guys don't have a chance, and this is the great thing that I think libertarians miss a lot is like they take you at 5 years old. The compulsory murder cult indoctrination camps that they send you off to at 5 years old, and they fill your freaking head with all this bullshit. To throw all of that off from that time, and then start to have to relearn things all over again. I mean, we've got a huge task in front of us, but there is something about, I think, a lot of human psyches, whereas once they see something, they can't unsee it. And if they have that itch, they're going to go, well, okay, well, what do you think about this? And if they have somebody that they trusted in that first step, and you can sit there and say, hey, man, here's economics in one lesson. Hey, man, here's some John Taylor Gatto. Hey, man, here's some Rothbard, whatever it is. Like, man, once they start that self-learning, that that questioning, or what do you think about, religion and all of this stuff is right there at our fingertips to say, well, here you go, man. This is what I learned. I haven't heard a better argument for it. So this is where I'm at until I do hear a better argument. It's an uphill battle for sure to first and foremost, have people that are in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and, later in life realize that they've never even defined their own principles, right? Have you defined your own principles, and are you consistent in principles? Those things right there, man, just to knock that down is, I mean, like I said, we've got an uphill battle for sure.
I love what you said. Well, one of your things was, what do you think about religion? Well, when I ask the average person, they will sort of have what you could call the Jehovah's Witness standard. It's a name I'm trying to popularize. I can't think of a better one. Please leave a better one in the comments. But we sort of have this idea. Jehovah's Witness can really do everything to persuade us. They can ask us to read the Bible. They could ask us to chip in for Bibles. They could go door to door, spending their Sundays and Saturdays trying to convince us of the word. But they still believe we should be free to burn in hell for all of eternity. But they're like, but when it comes to the state, they're like, I'm so terrified that a road won't get paved, therefore the mass murdering government's legitimate. It's like, what? You think I should be free to burn in hell, but you're terrified if I don't give a dementia patient in the White House another $1 trillion, the infrastructure is going to be weaker than it otherwise would be. I mean, I just wish they had just as much criticism of the state as they do for God. They say, hey, if you want to come to him, that's your thing. But the state, it's like, no, you can't opt out of this. This is how vitally important it is. Do you see statism as the world religion that people actually believe in? And as governor, what are you going to do to end this religion?
Well, all right. So two-part question, and you'll have to remind me of the second part. What am I going to do to end it as the second part? But yeah, I think the state is that in religion, right? If you read, especially through Christianity, they say that the devil's greatest lie was he didn't exist, right? And so the state in these kind of contexts for people is like, look, you guys, the state is a religion, and it's got all the holy text. It's got the high priests. It's got the bishops. It's got the clergymen. It's got all of the sacrifice that anybody in history ever had in terms of, the Reformations and the Protestant Reformation and the Spanish Inquisitions and anything else that you see in history is like, yeah, these guys have fooled everybody to thinking they're not a religion. It's a fucking cult, and it's a murder cult on top of it, right? So first and foremost, the separation of church and state is not that. It's that the biggest empire of them all is a cult. It is a religion, and it is mandatory for everybody. As a governor, how do you get rid of this? You identify it, you call it what it is, and you try to, not expose yourself to, areas where you could get fired upon, right? It's like, this is going to be a monumental task. It's education for people to say, hey, listen, I can free up and nullify your entire life by taking away, your property tax, right? Rent. I can get rid of sales tax, and you can get rid of income tax. You can start using all these funds for your own, your own needs, your own wants, and things like that. And I think at some point, the people who have been burdened through taxes and everything else, and compliance and fees and permission slips from the state, I think they go, yeah, you know what, this actually sounds way better than what we experienced in 2020 and 2021 with lockdowns and being non-essential. And when you start to open up their minds to the amount of absolute, creation that's possible within their own lives, within their own industry, within their own, work and everything else, they sit there for, I think you can get them to recognize that what's really, making them slow down in this entire, system is the government. And, there are going to be people that, they can't handle this kind of stuff because they are wardens, wards of the state, or that they're receiving all the kickback money from the banks in large industry. And I mean, really, you can sit there and you can kind of point them out in this whack-a-mole at that point. They're just going to stick their heads up. And if they're wealthy and affluent, they're obviously receiving subsidies or kickbacks or something like that. And then, if they don't have a pot to piss in, I guarantee you, they're already wards of the state, and we can take care of most of that kind of stuff with charity.
Yeah, look at how divisive politics is, and how the culture war gets you turning against your neighbors. It openly attempts to turn men against women with a fake gender wage gap, constantly pushing racial tensions. Whereas if you have separation of church and state, well, then you can be a Scientologist, and I can be a Calvinist. I couldn't think of the other one.
Here's the other thing, right? Is
Yeah.
like, hey, man, you want to be a communist? Cool. You guys go over there and be voluntary communists. You just got to let people out when they don't want to be a commie anymore. You want to be a socialist over there? Go ahead and be a socialist. You want to be a capitalist? Great. You want to be an anarchist? We don't give a fuck. Go do whatever you want to do, but you got to let people in and you got to let people out peacefully. That's the name of this game. So we can all interact and really have much more simple lives than we do now.
And we don't even need people to move and go start their own thing. You can just do it on GoFundMe, except when Matt Walsh raised the money for AOC's abuela, and she still didn't want it, even though she allegedly is in dire poverty because of the Puerto Rican hurricane. These people are so
Didn't you
fraudulent.
hear she's living in Florida?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, apparently she's.
that was such a blood pressure story for me that I'm like, I can't even. I need to make sure that it's real because I had trouble believing it. Yeah. I'm like refreshing her Twitter feed. I go, she's got to have an explanation. There's got to be more to this. There was no more to it. She said, Abuela needs money. Matt Welsh of the Daily Wire raised $150,000 or something ridiculous, and AOC's people got a hold of Matt and said that we won't be accepting the money.
I got my money back.
Explicitly, it's like they explicitly want to have problems exist just so they can use them. That's what FBI entrapment cases are about. Look at all this terrorism. FBI foils FBI terror plot again. You guys, right. you don't even want to solve the problems that are going on, or they'll stop businesses from coming into New York and then complain about the poverty. That's another thing AOC did. That was just a pissed off rant. I've totally lost everything here.
That's all good. No, I mean, I watched that whole thing, and then we had people saying, hey, we're going to start a GoFundMe in the Liberty movement, right? And I was like, yeah, right on. And then Matt Walsh just popped up in my feed like 5 minutes later, and I was like, oh, I'm going to go ahead and contribute to this, man. And yeah, to see AOC, talk about her abuela's ancestral home being at risk, I was like, oh, that's really unique. I know wording that you're using there. And then to find out, I guess somebody dug a little deeper, and she actually lives in Florida now. So, it might be her ancestral home. It might be something that somebody else owns or is squatting in or whatever is going on, or that are even maybe renting out. But it's definitely, what they want is the state down there, and the state to solve problems, or at least come in with the appearance of solving problems. Very interesting story.
Well, maybe she'll live in Florida now, but she's going to have to escape capitalism to free Cuba one of these days. I mean, in Cuba, don't you know that things are just free there? And Castro gave you gave you everything you wanted.
I've seen Michael Moore.
Let's think about the question: who will build the roads? When people say, "But without government, who will build the roads?" They most likely are not literally thinking, all right, who does it now? Contractors, how would we voluntarily fund this? Well, you could do it through billboards and adopt a highway. What they're saying is, I don't know how to respond to this principle of non-aggression and self-ownership, so I'm just going to throw the roads thing out there without even thinking about it. So knowing that people really are just trying to throw hurdles in your way, how do you communicate to them when trying to promote the message of freedom?
Well, I mean, on small things like that, you can dive into the weeds. I mean, most of the time, I was doing this thought experiment with a young lady here in Cherokee County not very long ago, and she was not convinced about privatizing police, right? And I was like, well, how do you feel about this, right? How do you feel about when a cop is on the side of the road? How do you feel about a cop when he's behind you? How do you feel when you're pulled over? How do you feel about your interactions with the boys in blue lately? And most of the time you get that response. It's like, man, I'm uncomfortable at minimum, right? Like, this is not a good feeling. I feel like I'm being watched, maybe even terrorized. Same thing with the roads. Like, how do you feel about the roads? Roads down here in Georgia suck. They used to be great, back in the day when there was actual asphalt on the roads instead of potholes and cracks, and it's a mess. And so at the end of the day, you can sit there and say, hey man, at the end of your encounter, whether you're driving on a road or whether you've had an interaction with police, do they ask you how your service was? Do you think they give a shit what you think about your service with them? No, they don't. Now, let's talk about, if Chick-fil-A was paving roads, do you think they'd want to know how your commute was? You're damn right. They'd want to know how your commute was. Do they want to know how your interaction with the police force was? Were they kind? Were they courteous? Did they have your rights in mind? Yeah, man. Those are the guys I'll keep paying. I'll make sure that those guys out there have my money, period. And so you can start, just thinking about, what great businesses do versus what the state does. And it's, just a clear delineation is like, listen, private people do most of these things to begin with. We can cut out all the middlemen and the bureaucracy and the waste and fraud and abuse, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican. We don't need those people. They don't know shit about shit, right? Like, as I've gotten into politics, I've found that politicians are the dumbest motherfuckers alive, right? Like, these guys will say anything and do anything. They just hold out their hand, and they're really good at one thing, and that's raising and taking people's money. And that's it, man. They're not good at anything else, and definitely not good, in the private sector. So yeah, it's one of those things where, I don't know, you can have those conversations, you can be nice about it, but use the Socratic method and ask questions, I think, is your best avenue to changing somebody's mind.
That's going to be, that's got to be one of your campaign advertisements. It's just like these hidden camera videos where you go up and everyone in the private sector are saying, how'd you like our service? What can we do better? As you often get. And then you go up to a public school teacher and say, you guys aren't teaching about how the minimum wage causes unemployment. I, as a taxpayer, sure as hell want that, because you crank out retards by the millions who vote for Bernie and Trump. So because of that, when are you guys going to start changing that? I need you to change that right now, and see how they respond. I asked them, I went to one of the meetings, right when you walk in, there's this big cartoon of the governor of Arizona stabbing a teacher in the back, and it's a teachers union. And I said, if someone wants to send their money to a charter school, is that too bad? I mean, is allowing people the option to go there with their school dollars, is that too bad? And a woman said, you're taking our money from public schools. What this does, this welfare state, you're all trying to be nice, it gets the worst people entitled and gets them in such a rut that they don't even like it. It's even bad for them. It's like it's giving a drug addict more money because Even though it feels good for them at the moment, they're so dumb and so entitled. They're terrified of anyone competing with them. It's literally like the jealous boyfriend who like, who are you just talking to over there? They're this insecure little child because they're just entitled to other people's money. It's terrible when their money is taken, but they have the right to steal hundreds of billions every year from everyone else's without providing anything in exchange. I want to get to the idea of government being a cult. How is the belief in government similar to being in a cult?
Well, you can't get out, right? Like, try to get out, they're probably going to try to kill you, especially if you don't do it by their ways, right? I think in America, it costs you over $2,000 if you want to renounce your citizenship. So, like, the final measure of getting out of the cult in America is pay $2,000, or maybe we'll just send people with guns to your house, and if you resist them hard enough, they'll probably cage or kill you, right? Like, holy fuck. If there was ever such a thing as a murder cult, like, that's probably it. Like, I don't know. They have chants, they have rituals, they do all of these things, they have symbols. I mean, look, you know, if you don't say the magic words to the magical sky cloth, then the shit doesn't liberty. Like, what the fuck are you guys talking about, right? Like, I don't get it. It's like religion. Like, I left religion a long time ago because I was like, dude, I don't buy this shit. I'm a questioning, rational, human being. And maybe I saw, in my transition phase, maybe a little too much Glenn Beck, where he was talking about, sitting reason, firmly in her seat and, questioning the very existence of God, because if God is an honest God, he must, I don't know, like the questioning instead of just the blind allegiance. And it's like, none of this shit makes sense, man. None of what they do in terms of the indoctrination and the culty bullshit. Like I said earlier, they take you at age 5 and they just brainwash your fucking mind for years with things like 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, and the Pythagorean fucking theorem. And there's no real history. There's no they don't talk about your rights. They don't talk about civics. They don't talk about taxes. They don't talk about all these things that free people or people that want to be free, that are the real liberty fighters, ever talk about. So yeah, is it a cult? I think it's a cult. I think it's one of the most well-funded fucking cults on earth, because they can print their own money and then award the people that are closest to them, going, oh yeah, man, this guy's really good at making our cult even bigger, stronger, and more murdery. So yeah.
Well, look at it. Has like one of the biggest cult features of single guy writes words down on paper. Now we all have to do that. FDR says, turn our gold in. Got to turn the gold in. Round up the Japs. Round up the Japs. If you like your healthcare, you can keep your healthcare. Even if it's a lie, you still got to follow the words written down on paper by lying psychopath. I mean, that is way worse than anything David Koresh or Jim Jones ever did. Well, Jones actually was so bad it might not be. Very few things are.
Trust me, the magnitude of what the cult does on a daily basis, I think, probably outweighs most of the population that ever lived on this earth.
You notice how they will say something like white supremacy is terrible. It's terrible. Well, we're all people. So if you have one group ruling over another, that's real bad. It's like, you just explained what the state is and why it's immoral. How do you not see? All government is congressional supremacy, and some people having the right to violently impose their will on others. That, for me, is one that I love to throw at them just to see how they respond. What do you think about ideas like that? Or what are some of the things you're going to use during your campaign to really red pill the population?
Yeah, I mean, right now, when the government can come out and declare you essential or non-essential, that was scary as shit, right? Like, I mean, when they can shut down 50 million jobs in America, like, hey guys, your right to assembly is fucked, and I said so. And if they will still assemble over there in groups of 10 or more within 6 feet of each other without masks, tell them to disperse. And if they don't, then call us. And you're like, Whoa, guys. So, yeah, we're going to be cutting back the government all over the place. And I mean, when I say cutting back, I mean, like, not, and like, we're not tweaking it. We're not getting into policy. We're not reforming this shit. We are getting rid of it. If it is under the executive, I guarantee you it's gone. Now, if you want it at your local level, maybe talk to your sheriff, maybe talk to the mayors in your local area. But as far as the state, I'm going to free you through nullification. So nullification, nullification, nullification. It's all about your rights, the rights so that we don't have enumerated in the Constitution. One of the, I guess, kind of one of my secret weapons is the fact that I know the Constitution pretty much forward and backward in the mechanics of why it is and how it works. And it's like, guys, listen, we're not going to do any of this stuff, feds, and you can keep your bullshit fiat currency. We're going to figure this shit out without you. And you can take all your Fed boys back up there to DC, because if they're down here and they are violating the rights of the citizens of Georgia, I'm going to throw U.S. Code 18242 at them, which is deprivation of rights under color of law. And so anything that hasn't passed through the constitutional way of an Article 5 amendment, which, you know, if you understand in Article 6.2, that if it is not in congruency or pursuance is their language, in pursuance with the Constitution, it is notwithstanding. So it's not a law to begin with. So all this Fed bullshit, it's gone. You guys were supposed to be war, peace, negotiation, and foreign commerce. Stay in your fucking lane over there, and we're going to do shit really differently down here. So between getting rid of education, and I should say the compulsory murder cult indoctrination centers, those are gone. We're going to get rid of, I mean, just so much waste, fraud, and abuse. And then we're going to open up our biggest industry, which is agriculture. You want to grow some hemp? Grow some hemp, man. We could be the biggest producer of hemp oil and really just supply every diesel engine on earth for, I think it's a year, with 2 bumper crops a year here in Georgia. Like, we're not talking about just, you know, getting high. We're talking about industry on top of industry on top of industry, creating more and more jobs for people. And besides that, you know, we're also kind of the carpet industry leader. I don't know if you guys know that in Arizona, but we import all of our jute from outside the country because we're not allowed to use it here. Where if Georgia could make it and produce it and manufacture it, the carpet industry here in Georgia would benefit alone. I mean, we've got a ton of things that we can do. Criminal justice reform is way up there for me. Qualified immunity, cash bail, ending the war on drugs, releasing all nonviolent offenders, and, you know, basically telling anybody that's got a badge on that if you're going to violate the rights of people, you're going to go to prison. I'm going to bring all the weight of the office against you, and you're done. So those are some of the key selling points on I guess a Hazel administration, which would be me. So.
You know, I really think there is a lot we can learn from AOC and Tlaib and Ilhan Omar as far as bold, unapologetic messaging goes. I mean, They're never like, well, I weighed the utils in my utilitarian theory of philosophy, and it seems like, Jim Crow had more costs than benefits. They'll just say equal rights. And we're here, and we're queer, and gays get equal rights. And, you have a right to health care, and we're going to abolish the police. They're so quick, so they give 1 million people the ability to memorize something so quick. What do you think is something we could learn from the messaging that the squad has done in the past few years? Whereas if you would have said, in, I don't know, Joe McCarthy's day or Nixon's day, hey, large portion of the country is going to openly call themselves democratic socialists, and they'll also be in Congress, and they're going to be friendly with Harris and Pelosi. I mean, this is just so far gone, but the squad has made it okay, and Bernie especially. What can we learn from them?
The messaging that they do is right in line with Saul Alinsky tactics, right? It's isolate and make fun of and ridicule until somebody quits. Well, I'm not really into that. I am into asking questions, which in itself, if you can get them to debate you, have conversations first and foremost, show your humanity and all that fun stuff. But here's the other thing: is be bold, be truthful. And I think most adults cuss, right? Which in politics, man, That's not okay. You can't call anybody, certain names. You can't say certain, fuck words and things like that. But as libertarians, you can and you should, because it's going to open doors to bigger conversations. As soon as somebody's outraged by what comes out of your mouth in terms of cuss words, you say, hey, if you're outraged by this cuss word, let me show you the people that you should actually be outraged about, who are over here caging and killing people in your own government. Right? Like, you want to be outraged, man. I got plenty for you to be outraged about. Come with me. Let's go talk. Right. And so, it is a door. It's an Overton window. And nobody has been fighting for us on that Overton window side, damn near ever as libertarians. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why the Mises Caucus is attracting the people that it's attracting right now. And, it's not to say that we are the end all be all, but we are going out and doing liberty to a section of the population that I think wants to be left alone, that I think is, for a large majority, the people who are a little more self-sustaining, the people who are entrepreneurs, the people that don't want the government to provide security for them, that don't want them to provide anything in their lives, because they know every time that they provide something, it comes with a hook. You're talking to people who are, in the middle of the road, that have just borne the brunt and kept their mouth shut and really wanted to be kind of the warrior in the garden, so to speak, versus, the people that, want something from the government, whether it's, protection or whether it's, a free handout. So I think in our messaging, the bolder you can be without being a complete dick. I mean, it's a fine line, and there's a little bit of art to it, but for me, it's worked extremely well over the past couple of years.
And it's not just people who, are really interested in being free and see all the regulatory hurdles that the state has. It's even people who, were like very into the state growing, but then were like, oh my God, I can't believe someone like Trump could get in there and impose his will on us. And now the right's like, oh God, maybe we shouldn't have, been so blasé about Trump's spending, because now there's a dementia patient who's run by President Xi, calling the shots in the White House now. Rest in peace to the White House dog, by the way. That was a real tragedy.
Oh, did it die, huh?
It did, yeah. A million kids in Yemen, I don't care about. This White House dog, though.
The German really Shepherd, sad. Is that what they had?
I think so.
And it bit the dust? Damn, man. I'll tell you what. That's what we should do. We should have a meme out there with them and the fucking, kids in Yemen right now. For God's sakes. Like, that, exactly. That should be a real fucking thing, to just highlight how fucked up the propaganda is here in America.
Exactly. Which got more attention from the political class. What do you think about playing the class game of, how they'll try turning the proletariat against the bourgeoisie, men versus women? What if we actually did that on principle, where we said there's an evil class out there who achieves their ends violently, and then there's another class who does things voluntarily? What do you think about us not saying screw the class politics, which tends to get people very motivated? What if we embrace them on principle and get people talking about ideas like that?
Yeah. It's a beautiful spectrum over there. The violent, murderous, cagey spectrum versus the peaceful. I mean, seriously, that's the thing, is like, you can talk about this stuff all the time. This is one thing, like, they've called me radical for a very, very long time. So I just kind of adopted the name, right? And they're doubling down. And at the end of the day, it's like, hey, man, the difference between me and those guys over there is I'm begging you guys for peace. Like, I don't want to point guns at you for anything. And so it's a very easy case to make for us that are the peaceful people, but you've got to lead with it. You got to insert it into the middle of your conversation, and you got to follow up with it, because anytime the state can perceive you as somebody violent, or take clips of you, with some, I don't know, harsher rhetoric, it's one of those things where they'll try to villainize you. And, as long as, they can't do that, because you've been on the record over and over and over, always saying, hey, be peaceful. It buys us time. It buys us space in this really weird world. If we would have gone kinetic in this past year as gun owners, we would be literally in the middle of a civil war right now. for this nation, and people would be dying at a much higher rate than they are. So yeah, no, I think we should definitely attack that spectrum that wants to be all murdery and cagey, for sure.
And one last thing about strategizing. What do you think about the political correctness, us sort of embracing that? So whenever someone says, we should do this, we stop them and say, you mean the government? And they go, well, yeah, the government. No, don't say government. Call it the theft-funded mass murdering death cult that Shane Hazel's going to abolish. That's I can't talk to you unless you call it that. You need to say the words right now, or else I need to leave. Like, we need to be just. I mean, they get so worked up about, you know, alleged incidents of man-spreading on the subway, where meanwhile it's like, you know, the state has billion-dollar bailouts to the wealthiest people on the planet, while
who are murdering people. Who are pushing critical race theory, right? Like,
yeah, really.
Nobody gives a shit if you guys are, you know, represented in your company that bombs the fuck out of everybody all around the world, right? Like, we're talking about kids and peaceful people all around the world, especially the Middle East. Like, God, like, yeah, no, we're like, I don't think we need to play by the rules. And here's the other thing is strategy and the way we are perceived out there. You also got to be these people in the liberty crowd that say, hey man, like, I don't agree with that strategy, right? Like me and Tho Bishop, we don't agree on fucking strategy in terms of how liberty spreads most efficiently. But here's the thing is, I'm okay with the way he's going to do it. I don't care. Like, cool. You're going to go out and do some liberty. At least you're taking action. So if you're going to be PC and you're going to go after the belt buckle of the Bible Belt, by all means, have fun, man. Been there, done that, got the t-shirt. If you want some help, let me know. However, don't you say a fucking word about the way I'm doing it over here, where I'm actually growing crowds and growing audiences and putting people into action to say enough is enough is enough, that spread that in their own communities with their own people in their own circles who will actually have those conversations with them.
This is the point Adam Smith made 240 something years ago about the importance of the division of labor. I mean, It's not like there is the way is to show people that Ron DeSantis had less lockdowns and the numbers are even better than places that had big lockdowns. Maybe that will intrigue someone. Maybe that will plant the seed. So when they hear other things later, I don't know, maybe some people, it's unapologetic messaging. Who was it that got you to consider libertarianism as, I don't want to say who convinced you. Who was the first person where you heard it, you at least then maybe considered it as a possibility of being the correct philosophy?
Oh, it had been Ron Paul. I mean, I had read quite a bit of liberty before then through John Taylor Gatto. It was really kind of my awakening book, and it was really a harsh situation where I had it. But, you know, when this little guy in this big suit was up on stage, you know, talking about, you know, like, hey, they don't hate us for our freedom. They hate us because we're killing them. I was like, yeah, man, as a veteran, I think you're fucking right. Like, I know you're right. And now I look around and I found all these other dudes that are combat vets that are, you know, giving this guy money, and he raises more money from combat vets than anybody else. Like, I was like, okay, what's this guy about? And you start looking into him. And when he starts, you know, talking about libertarianism, wherever you pick that up, whether it was, what was it, 1988 when he ran for president back then, or, you know, fast forward into the future in his manifesto or whatever it was, you know, the principles, whether he comes out and says I'm a libertarian or not, I was just like, yeah, you know what, let me take a look at this. And so I think it was 2015 where I actually joined the Libertarian Party. And I joined the Libertarian Party before I knew who Nick Sarwark was and before I knew who the LNC was. And then they put up Gary Johnson and Bill Weld, and I was like, fuck, guys, like, I can't do it yet. Like, if you guys are just going to go out and do like Republican light bullshit, like, I'm out. Fuck this. You know, after that, when I, you know, was not only a card carrying member, but was actively involved, I'll credit both Michael Heiss and Ryan Graham. Michael Heiss being the brains behind the MC here in the Libertarian Party, and Ryan Graham, the party chair down here in Georgia, who was like insistent, like, hey man, you know you're not a Republican, right? And I was like, yeah, shut up. I'm trying to pull some, you know, asymmetric warfare and some psyops here to try to destroy them from the inside. So
You're basically doing what the FBI did with COINTELPRO. You're infiltrating the organization and really screwing things up. But you're really playing for our side here. Gary Johnson and Bill Weld and Jorgensen, frankly, they really should be ashamed of themselves. And, you know, Jorgensen was so nice to come on my show. I don't have, I'm not exactly
mine too, man.
Bill Bear on Fox, but I mean, you had this platform, and with great power comes great responsibility. As we all,
Spidey.
as we all said, with, is that where it came from? I only heard it with when Joe Paterno was getting in trouble, and then I heard that the Paterno story was fake. But the point is certainly if you are in a position of influence and you have access, she ran with Harry Brown. She knows what is the deal with the state, and she just didn't freaking do it. That was
I think it was a lack of courage, man. I really do. I think that if there's something, and maybe this is something, you know, a realization is if you don't have the courage to die for this kind of stuff, you should not be the person out in front of people fighting for this kind of stuff. Because the courage of your conviction to say the tough things in crowds where it's unpopular and say what some people will consider absolutely outrageous and radical, that courage is what we have to have going forward. So yeah, I 100% agree with you on the way she messaged your way right out of any type of relevancy.
What do you think about communicating to soldiers the idea of blowback by simply reading bin Laden's own words? Do you think that is a way to maybe bring them over to our side, or what do you think about getting the police and military to not enforce the extremism laws that we know are coming?
Yeah, the police are going to be a different story than I think the combat vets. Most of the combat vets that I know, and I'm one myself, it's one of those things where I think once you see what it is, that's a racket, right? Like, Smedley Butler war's a racket. Once you see war, you're like, oh man, we're not here to win. We're not here to freedom. We're not here to liberty. Is completely foreign to everything that you were ever indoctrinated with. So I don't think it's that crowd that you really have to do a whole lot for. Now, the police is a different story. And this is something where I'm doing something locally here. We just had an officer die. And before that, this Holly Springs Police Department had pulled over one of my friends for driving while black, and I recorded the interaction with the chief. And long story short, the chief hung up on me, and so I followed up with the mayor, who's obviously in charge of what the police are doing and their policy down there. And I said, hey man, I've got this whole thing recorded, and by the way, if you don't stop this shit, I'm going to get a grand jury. Get their attention, right? Like let's if you need help getting their attention, call us. I'll do shows like this no matter what. And so to say, hey, listen, I got everything you need. And what I'm putting together with not only the Helios project, but with this governor run right now, is a place where people can sign up and say, this is what we're all about in terms of libertarianism, right? It's like what we talked about with criminal justice reform. And you write out the proclamation that cites U.S. Code 18242, that cites, Article 6, Section 2 of the Constitution, that cites the Fifth Amendment, and that none of these things have transpired. And so we are free to nullify those right here at home. And so it's basically, how do you encourage and have that courage stand up in a mayor, in a police chief, in a sheriff, in your local areas? And if you can find those people or put them into office, you have a really, really good chance of affecting some great change, whether it's getting stop and ask questions and prove your innocence, to white, black, expensive car drivers, whoever, if it is ending civil asset forfeiture, if it's, the idea that, hey man, we're not going to prosecute people for, nature anymore. So you guys out there that like cannabis and psilocybin and all that fun stuff, you know what? Good for you. Like, that's not our business. So it's things like that in practice that I've found that are extremely helpful in converting those people. And on top of it, you get to add, hey man, you'll be a lot safer. You got a much better chance at going home to your family at the end of the day. And honestly, if we're being, good stewards of our own community, we want that for those people too. We have to want it. We have to want to make their lives better, which incentivizes and it endears us to those populations at the same time.
That is so true, because you really do disarm them once you say something like, I really just want to make your job easier, because I really do think the vast majority of police and military members certainly go in wanting to get the bad guys, so to speak. And they'll sort of rationalize, well, I got to enforce the law. It's not really my fault. I mean, I don't make the laws. So if these people want to change it, they can, write their congressmen and whatnot. But look at how bad that is for them. In their attempt to stop the bad guys, they become the bad guys. And with civil asset forfeiture, it has surpassed private burglaries ever since 2016 or something. Just something.
2014. At 2014, it was over $7 billion, and robberies only accounted for half of that amount in 2014.
Exactly.
Crazy.
Yeah. Well, wild stuff. So as far as your elevator pitch, so many people think, I already know what that libertarianism is. Do you have an elevator pitch for your campaign to really grab people's attention? If you had to appeal to, lowest common denominator is very offensive, the widest range of people, what would your elevator pitch message be to them?
I'm not fucking them. There is that. I mean, it's short, it's sweet. I don't have an elevator pitch for them yet. And it's one of those things that, I had to do as Republicans, come up with an elevator pitch. And I felt like it was too disingenuous because I was talking to too many different swaths. But if you want freedom, if you're tired of the state in your lives, if you're tired of them in your business, if you're tired of them in your house from the time that you roll out of your federally approved mattress and take your federally approved shower with your shower head and the FDA, federally approved deodorant with the aluminum in it and the toothpaste that you use all the way until you get back to fucking your federally approved mattress at the end of the day, I'm your guy. I'll probably use a lot more fucks though.
You won't be that polite. Well, one of the final things here, this is a quote from Murray Rothbard's Egalitarianism as Revolt Against Nature. He says, to use the phrases of the New Left of the late 1960s, the ruling elite must be demystified, delegitimated, and desanctified. Nothing can advance their desanctification more than the public realization of the true nature of their egalitarian slogans. So whether it's about egalitarianism or the wars or anything else, how do we delegitimize the state in the minds of the masses?
Oh, man, know your crowd. If you're talking to Republicans, you go out there and you talk about how they're, spending your great grandchildren into oblivion, and they're taking away every dollar that you ever earned, things of that nature, that they're sending our best and quote unquote brightest off to die in never ending wars, which I think most Republicans are against these days. And then for the Democrats, you out left them on the left. Criminal justice reform is where it's got to be for those guys. And the dropping of bombs. I think most people in America are tired of war. I don't care if they're left, right, or center. I think they're all tired of it. So I think that's how we delegitimize them. We talk about the numbers of people that they've caged and killed, how we're not free, which I think people absolutely believe these days with the past year behind us. And if you can demystify it and you can take their sacredness and really just feed it right back to them in terms of the sacrifices they're making, I think it becomes very unpalatable very quick for most people.
And for some people that are a little bit intrigued by some of these ideas, what is one book you would recommend everyone read and look into if they want a better idea into the concept of self-ownership, the non-aggression principle?
Yeah, self-ownership. One of the best is Conceived in Liberty, Murray Rothbard, and it goes through the entire philosophy where he couples liberty with property, which was really not done until up about that point. And he also kind of puts into perspective the the Constitution of the United States, which is going to be a very hard pill for a lot of people to swallow, that it was a coup, and that the anti-federalists were absolutely correct in their proposition to stay a confederation at most. So yeah, I definitely recommend that book. If that one's too heavy, maybe education is your thing. Anything John Taylor Gatto. I think anything from Connor Boyack is great. If you want to be inspired about how to possibly pursue your dreams, I think Crushing It by Gary Vee is a great place to start in terms of using social media to grow your own brand and to do things. And I don't know, outside of that, maybe a fun, terrible, awful read is 1 Second After. It is a book about the basically nuclear war that renders a family back to the Stone Age, and it's kind of the Asheville, North Carolina setting. So why I say that is if you're not preparing yourself and having a little bit of substance around you for bad situations where maybe the government shuts you down for a year, or they go to war or whatever it is, it will help you get into the mindset that bad things can happen, and you should have some things prepared for you and your family.
That's interesting that it takes place in North Carolina. There was actually a nuke that fell out of a plane in North Carolina, and 8 of the 9 switches activated, but there was a deactivation. So what happened was government inefficiency saved North Carolina from getting nuked by the U.S. government. That's not a joke. Are you
kidding me?
Yeah. Yeah.
What? What? Can you tell me where, what, is that a book or a story or
Well, if this was an implanted memory, I'm really going to look bad here.
Dude,
but I'm gonna get that to you, or find out that it's fake, and then I'll pretend this episode never happened.
No, they talk about that kind of stuff where they they dropped one out of a torpedo tube in the middle of the Baltic Sea or something like that, and they that's why they run subs and everything else down there. That's why they thought maybe a Russian sub had been looking for it. That the entire the entire crew died because the sub collapsed. Yeah, it's very interesting to me.
And well, one time there was also a virus that was released from the Wuhan Lab Institute of Virology. That's another story for a different time. We don't have time to get into that. I do want to find that right now. So, final question: what is the most important thing you learned being in the military?
Oh man, I think it's probably the idea that you can always do one more thing. It's at the end of the day, being in special operations, you try to take the best out of it that you can, and it's that there's so much in you that you didn't realize that you can do, as long as you never give up, never quit, just continue to take one more step, do one more thing. Whatever it is. And if you can do that in life, I don't think there's anything that can stop you on your way to realizing your dreams.
Well, Mr. Hazel, thank you so much for your time. The article is from The Guardian. Goldsboro Revisited, account of hydrogen bomb near disaster over North Carolina declassified document, written on the 22nd of October, 1969 by Parker F. Jones, the supervisor of the Nuclear Weapons Facility Department at Sandia National Laboratories. The document has recently been declassified, having been acquired under the Freedom of Information Act provisions by whatever. It's a long document, but they actually have it in there. The link will be in the description below. Mr. Hazel, thank you so much for your time, and thank you to everyone for watching Keith Knight Don't Tread on Anyone and the Libertarian Institute. Take care, Mr. Hazel.